Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local. Welcome to a special and slightly unconventional episode of All Home Care Matters. Why? Because today's mic is in a different set of hands. I'm Peter Murphy-Lewis. I'm a fractional chief marketing officer and founder of Strategic Pete, producer and host of docuseries People Worth Caring About, now going into his 6th season. But why it matters is because I'm honored to be in the captain seat of one of the most respected platforms in senior living, and you know it. You know this is not the voice that you're accustomed to, but guess what? He's our guest. He really needs no introduction. He's a healthcare professional, an author, a senior care influencer, the voice you've come to know and love, Lance A. Slatton. But let me be clear. This is not an interview. This is a conversation. I've fallen in love with his interview style, his personality. He and I have talked offline on the phone, and we send each other pictures of our kids playing basketball. He's a real human being, and that's what we're going to try and get to. We're going to talk about how caregiving is shift. We're going to talk about some of his most memorable moments, like his coverage in Washington, D.C., of Elizabeth Dole Foundation. So let's get into it. Lance, welcome to your own program.
Thank you, Peter. And I think after everyone hearing your voice, I might be out of a job. So I'm happy to be here, though.
Lance, I want to start off with something that might make you blush. I read this today in preparation. This is a review of a book that came out in 2024. I think the author is you. It's called The All Home Care Matters Official Family Caregivers Guide. And the review says this book is very clearly written with the intent of helping others. Lance does not make you feel that his way is the only way, but he makes you feel that you are not alone. What is the most flattering feedback, Lance, you've ever received from all the work that you do?
Yeah, it's hard, Peter. I'll just be upfront and honest. And you know me fairly well now. And it's hard for me to talk about myself because I'm always trying to lift others up and, support other people's work. And it's really the genesis and the motivation is to support these families out there that don't know what they don't know, kind of like my situation was that led me into this work. But I think one of the greatest things that for me that has meant the most is, that I'm a good friend and I'm helping people for the right reasons, because that's all I want to be known as is, a person of good integrity and that I'm willing to help people out that are in need.
I love it. Lance, I want to go to kind of an icebreaker conversation. Imagine this, that we're all in the backyard of a mutual friend and we don't know each other. What is Lance into when he's not saving the caregiving world? What's the first thing that you would tell me about other than your kids? I'm going to take healthcare away from you and your kids away from you. What are you going to tell me about?
You got great hair. But that is kind of serious too. But I would be talking about, my love of baseball, my love of history, and love coaching, my kids are all involved in sports. I coach all 3 of them. My daughter is a standout, elite travel soccer player. My son is following those footsteps very closely, but is as good, if not better, at basketball. And, I really want to instill the same values that I have in my kids. I think as parents, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, first and foremost, you hope your kids are healthy. You hope your kids have good lives, that they marry good people, that they have a good family. But in order to do that, I think they have to have good values. And, we just want our kids to be respectful and have the same values that we're trying to instill in them that were instilled in us.
What is the most, I have 2 follow-up questions on that. What is the most frequent phrase, adage, words of advice that you say to your kids? If I were to ask them, what would they say? I've heard this the most out of my father's mouth.
Did you give it your best? My daughter, and I'll follow up if real quick, Peter, my daughter, I was sharing with you earlier, we're here in Michigan, and Wednesday I was on my way to the school, and my daughter had soccer, so I had to pick her up and get her to practice. And we got hit with just a snow blizzard, snowstorm that no one saw coming. The weather people didn't have a warning for it. It came out of nowhere, came up through Canada actually, and we were on our way to practice. And my oldest daughter plays basketball. And Wednesdays we don't have sports at the school, and I'm actually the coach with her basketball team. And she was going to stay home from church on Wednesday. So after my daughter's soccer practice was over, we normally all go to church on Wednesday, and we leave practice, and her and I get over there, and my wife, son, and oldest daughter are already there. My wife said, after soccer, just drop her off and get my oldest daughter, because she said, Mom, I really need to go home and study tonight, because they had midterms Thursday and today, and they got a snow day. But I'll never forget, Wednesday night, she's 10:30, 11 o'clock, she's still studying away, and this is like 4 or 5 hours straight of studying, and very committed, and she wanted to do her best, and she's having a little anxiety, what if I don't do good, I'm gonna, in normal test anxiety stuff I think all of us experience at some point. And I told her, I said, as long as you can look at yourself and tell yourself you did your best, I go, honestly, I don't care what you get, but as long as you did your best, that's all that can be asked of you. And I kind of apply that with my kids in all that they do, because I don't want them to have pressure that they have to be the best or that they have to get the best grade. But my philosophy really is, as long as you give your best and you didn't, shortchange yourself or cheat yourself, there is no complaint anybody should have.
Hmm. I love the follow up. I love the quote, the question. I'm going to implement it. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah.
In the day with my child. Lance, follow up questions around sports. Who's your baseball team, and which is the baseball team that you dislike more than the team that you love?
All right. Well, I am a diehard Atlanta Braves fan. And that really kind of is where my professional life and my personal, passion for sports converge. When I was younger, Peter, my grandparents lived down south, and from the time I was old enough to go down there and stay, I would stay my entire summer vacation with them. And it was Atlanta Braves all day long. They didn't have a professional baseball team, but it was either WGN and the Chicago Cubs, or TBS and the Atlanta Braves, and it was Braves 100%, still is to this day. And the team I really hate the most is the LA Dodgers.
Been a difficult couple years for you then.
Yeah, it's been rough sledding. And there's a lot of talk about, baseball's the only sport that doesn't have a salary cap. That is true. We do have a luxury tax, so all the teams in baseball will be benefiting from the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars that the Dodgers are now spending. And every team has the same opportunity, though, as the Dodgers. So I can't really blame the Dodgers, because they're willing to spend the money. And, I've read some papers and research and data. Even your smallest market, tiny teams make money. No major league sports team actually loses money, but some people just have different reasons for owning the team. And some, it's simply to maximize profit and, invest a little bit back in the team, but not to the fullest extent to really be competitive. The Braves are extremely competitive. I mean, they have one of the best teams in baseball, but they're not out spending the money like the Dodgers, but nor is anyone else.
Mm. You and I have that in common. I collected a lot of baseball cards, probably from 1985, probably up till 1995, and the most valuable cards I have are all Braves cards. I was a Braves fan. Lance, about soccer, any chance you're going to try to go to a World Cup game this year in the United States?
Yes. So, haven't shared this with my wife yet, so this might be breaking news to her. But last night, when my daughter was leaving soccer, one of her teammates that she's really close with, the dad actually stopped us and said, "Hey, you guys, in February, we're going down to Columbus, Ohio, to one of the U.S. women's games. What do you think about going?" And I mean, my daughter and I are both like, absolutely. I said, well, let me talk it over with my wife. Um, we just incurred some, extra expenses about, with this new venture that we'll talk about in a little bit. But the tickets are very reasonable, Peter. They're like $48 for really great
Mm,
seats. So,
yeah.
I'm going to see if we can't swing that. The only trouble is it is during the school week, so she would have to miss a couple days of school. But her teacher is a diehard sports person, and she's great. Like the other day Wednesday, when the weather was so bad. Uh, Full disclosure, I'm also the athletic director at our kids' school. I'd pop by her classroom because I had to go down to my office, and my daughter happened to be by the door because there's only 10 minutes of school left, and they'd see me walking by, and the kids always like, "Hey, hi." And my daughter said, "Dad, do you think we can leave now?" I said, "We can't leave. School's not over." And her teacher said, she goes, "It's fine." She goes, "We're totally done. The room's cleaned up." She goes, "Go ahead and leave. I don't want you guys to have to rush with the bad weather." And so her teacher would be like, "Oh, yeah." She'd probably encourage her to go. And maybe for makeup work, she'd have to write a little paper about her experience or something. But we're definitely going to try to make that happen because it doesn't happen often that they're this close.
Yeah. There is a very, very good chance that I'm going to be able to get 4 tickets for the Men's World Cup in June and July
Wow.
at almost every stage, and I'm only going to need 2. So let's talk
Oh my
in
gosh.
about a month or two, and see if there's a chance that you could either take all 4 to a city I'm not going to, or any that you can go to.
Wow. Yeah. No, absolutely, Peter. That'd be great.
Lance, so you were headed for medical school until life took a detour. If the 20-year-old version of Lance saw you today running a media platform, filming in DC and advocating for millions, would he be confused, or would he be able to put the dots together saying, "Oh, there were some things about him as an adolescent, as a teenager that now makes sense to who he is now"?
Not as a teen or an adolescent, but in college, Peter, I was a little bit older than, the 19, 20-year old. Um, my stepdad, who was very, very close to myself and to, obviously, to my mom and my sister, he actually adopted my sister. I elected not to be adopted because I did know my biological dad. He was somewhat in the picture, but distant for various reasons. And so I had a lot of respect for him. He actually was a huge pillar in the soccer community here in Michigan, and I mean huge. And in fact, the EMU soccer stadium is named after him.
Wow.
Yeah, and he brought indoor soccer to Michigan. The club my daughter plays for was actually created and started by him, but nobody knows that because we don't want anybody to say, "Oh, she's just playing because of this or that."
Right.
But so I went down to Indiana for college. I went down there for college, but never really did college because I went right after he had passed. He went a spring, sunny day. He had to go down to Ohio, and he was trying to recruit and scout this girl to come play soccer at EMU. And on the way home, dry roads, sun, middle of the day, nothing, nefarious in the weather or the conditions. For unbeknownst to anybody, his car had rolled out of control, and he was ejected through the sunroof. And the University of Michigan Life Flight had to land on the expressway, pick him up, and transport him to U of M Hospital. And they were very close in proximity, but he had passed en route. And that really shook us all to our core. And there's still effects to it to this day.
Mm.
My mom never remarried. And, my sister was adopted by him. And that was shortly around the time I was leaving for college. And it was too soon. And, I was trying to, be strong. I can do this, but I was not, in hindsight there, I was not nearly ready. But, at the university, not down in Indiana, but up here, when I did get back in and started pushing forward, one of the chancellors called me a social entrepreneur because I was connecting like all of the different schools, business, health, different things. And brought Patch Adams to the university for a 2.5 day stay with us, which how we pulled that off I will never know. I started by writing him a letter, just taking a shot, put my phone number in there and everything. He wrote me back a handwritten letter. I wrote him back a handwritten letter. He wrote back yet again. And then one day I'm getting out of the shower. I go to my phone. I have a voicemail, and it's Patch Adams leaving me a voicemail on my phone. And it just knocked me out. And so I called him, obviously, immediately. And he said, yeah, I would love to come to your university. What are you guys thinking? And I said, well, I had like all these ideas. And he's like, oh, so you really want to put me to work, huh? And I said, or whatever you want to do, sir, And he goes, no, I think it sounds great. So like the first day he went around to different classrooms. I put together a committee of other students to kind of be the committee for when he came. And he went and, did a big, large speaking engagement that Friday night at the university. And I don't know if it still is, but at the time they said it was the largest attended event in the school history. And they had a president come and speak there. So that tells you something. And
Wow.
yeah, and then the next day we got up and we went, clowning with him at one of the local hospital systems. And it was just an incredible experience. And, after to follow that up, I put together a large free healthcare event and invited some of the, hospitals and, every aspect of healthcare you can possibly imagine, had them in our big gathering, like almost like auditorium room, if you will. They all had tables, free screenings, free resources, and that's when he's like, man, you are like really a social entrepreneur, are you? And it didn't really make sense to me. I'm just doing what I think is going to help other people. And so I can kind of see it now where a lot of this makes sense. But at the time, I'm just laser focused on, getting into med school and doing what I've wanted to do since I was a little kid. And then everything changed when my wife, newlyweds at the time, got the phone call that my father was sick. And the nurse said our options were he could either come stay with us, or she goes, he'll have to go into rehab for a couple of weeks. Well, of course, he can come stay with us. And that couple of weeks turned into almost 3 years and 7 major surgeries later. But what the impactful part about all of that is never thought for a moment the word caregiver entered my mind or thought of myself as a family caregiver. But the other thing about it was all these different aspects of healthcare, surgeons, social workers, registered nurses, family doctors, visiting nurses, visiting therapists, all of it. Not one of those disciplines ever said to my wife and I, have you thought about getting some respite? Have you looked into these resources to help support you and support your dad? And he was a veteran, not a wartime veteran, but he served in the Marine. He didn't see any combat, but nothing ever was presented to us. And so about 2.5 years into it, where we had no choice, but he had to go into a facility because he had osteomyelitis, infection of the bone, and he had to have IV antibiotics daily. And I'm a poor college kid. My wife just started her career, and we couldn't afford to pay for that. And Medicare isn't going to pay for that. And so he had to go into the facility. I went over there every day, brought him dinner, a lot of times lunch and dinner. Almost like he was still living at home. And it was when I went to have lunch with a good friend of mine, they were hiring at a home health care company inside his building. Now, at the time, I'm doing student teaching at the university. I'm working in the labs in the university. I'm the, founder and, president or whatever of our medical fraternity that I brought to the university. And I needed to find a way to make some more money, and so I popped in there and spoke to the gentleman who was at the front desk of this business, home healthcare, that says now hiring, immediate start, top pay. And I asked him for specifics because I did EMT and paramedic training in preparation of a med school application, never got state licensed. I just passed the courses, got the certifications, and which allowed me to work in cardiac critical care in one of our local hospitals. And he couldn't tell me a single thing. And you just kind of stand there perplexed a little bit. And I said, okay, well, thank you. And he said, well, I can look into it if you want to stop back in later, or, whatever he said. And I left there and I was headed home. I called my wife and I said, I have a great idea. And she said, what's that? I said, we need to start a company to help people like us. Because my dad was still at the home with us, but it was getting close to where he was going to have to go into the facility. And she's like, oh, well, look into it. See what you think. Peter, I literally thought I had invented the wheel because, again, we're dealing with doctors, hospitals, all these professions for 2.5 solid years regularly, and never once was home care presented to us, respite care, nothing. And you would think if something like that existed, surely we would be great candidates for them to, provide that information to. And no one ever had. And then when I go on the internet and Google it, it's like, oh, there's an entire industry. And so that's where the genesis of our home care company came from.
When was that founded?
Oh, geez. Around 2011 ish, right around there.
What was the hardest thing from a business point of view, from an entrepreneur point of view?
Well, I'm a very naive, blissfully ignorant, naive person. So, like, what might be very challenging to others, I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal. And that was kind of the situation here. But I quickly stood corrected. I thought the hardest part would be finding clients and families that would need our services. And I remember even my mother, my wife, they would say, "Oh no, I think the hardest part's going to be finding the staff." And I'm like, "Everybody wants to work. Everybody needs to work. That should be easy." And I quickly discovered the hardest part was finding the staff. That's still a challenge, especially through COVID and everything. But why it's a little more challenging maybe for us than maybe others, I don't know. I'm only speaking for ourselves. One, Michigan is a non-licensed state. So anyone and everyone, I could hire you to, I know you're qualified, Peter, but let's say you're not. I could hire you today, send you into a home. I have nobody that I have to check with or get clearance from. I can hire anybody. I could hire the mailman. I'm well within my rights. There is no qualifications, restrictions. But we function as though we're in Illinois, which is a licensed state where you do have to have credentials, you do have to have qualifications, and we do full extensive background checks, personality tests, you name it. And it has served us very well for the last 6 years now. We've been the number one company in Michigan, something we're very proud of. Not to say it to be braggadocious, but to say it because it's a lot of pride, because we're not cutting the corners that we hear so many other companies are from these families that maybe didn't find us first, and they have these horrific bad experiences other places. Then they come here and it's kind of like an awakening for them. And the same can be said for a lot of our staff. They're mistreated, they're lied to, they're taken advantage of, and then they see how we function and how we operate, and they quickly discover, okay, they don't just talk the talk, they actually walk the walk too. And we've had people that have been with us 11, 12 years and never left. And that's because we treat them with respect, and we also give them opportunities for growth too.
Love it. Love it. I want to ask a question about, your journey and this kind of goes back to the testimonial about the person who read your book. Have you ever run into somebody who follows you on the podcast or here on YouTube or discovered your book, and they break down and just share with you about how important you've been to them, and you'll never forget that moment?
Yeah, I not for the book. We've had some really nice, wonderful emails. But one of the episodes that really, it's a situation like you're speaking about that really stands out, led to an episode of All Home Care Matters. And this was a woman who is in Australia, in a very remote part of Australia. And we got an email, and it basically started out, "Hi, just wanted to say thank you for what you guys are doing. You don't know me, but..." And then she goes into how she's listened to everything and just can tell we're very sincere, and we have a lot of, integrity in what we're doing and situations we're talking about. And she wanted to know if there would be any way possible that we would consider her to be on the show. She said, "I don't have a big social media following. I don't have a brand. I don't have a name out there." She goes, "I'm essentially a mother, and my son was born with Williams syndrome, and I've never shared it publicly that he was born with Williams syndrome. He was born, we got the diagnosis, and I made the decision at that point, I'm never going to tell him until he's an adult that he has it, because I don't want him to use that as an excuse or a crutch for the rest of his life. I don't want him to be limited by a label." And no one in that little community ever told him, and some didn't know it, or if they knew it, they never, acknowledged it. And she says, I really feel like now's the time to share it and talk about it, and I want you guys to be the ones to do it. And that was very emotional for me, even because I think it's a prime example, like the amazing, incredible work that you do, Peter, is touching lives and people everywhere, and most of them you'll never even hear or know about. So when you're touching people, you're just hoping it's helping them. And then to have somebody tell you how impactful it's been and what it's meant to them and how they feel comfortable sharing literally a 19, 18, 19-year-old secret, and they're picking you, and you have no idea, you have no prior relationship with these people to share it with. That still to this day has stood out to me as by far one of the most meaningful things we've experienced.
Wow, powerful. I I want to move into podcast questions, and I
Sure.
think you gave us a good transition. And this is around quirks. What is a quirk that you have developed, having interviewed people for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hours, that you bring home with you? Like maybe your wife says, "Hey, don't ever say that word again. Let's dive a little bit deeper." Or some type of pause or a way that you ask a question that all of these hours have impacted how you talk when you don't have a microphone in front of you.
Oh, wow. That's a good one, Peter. I would say for me, it's being able to turn it off just once I leave here. That's why for me, the sports, and that's why I love, coaching my kids and being the athletic director. It's a nice little breakaway, because we spend, hours upon hours, doing the show and writing articles and talking to potential guests, and, just having that, divergence, because I'm very like, laser focused, and I need that break. So, when I get home, it's really being able to, break away from that, especially over the last 3-4 months with this transition that you and I talked about, because it's important to still be present, right? And focus on the family stuff and the non-work stuff and the non-podcasting stuff, when you are with your family, because as you know, I'm sure perfectly well as I do, that time that you have with your kids, it may seem like a long time, but now that my daughter's 13, my other daughter's 11, and my son's 9, I literally will stop sometimes, and I it just and be mesmerized, like, how did this happen? Like, I can remember, like, when we purchased our buildings, my son was coming in, couldn't walk, and he's being pushed in a stroller, and it's incredible how quickly it goes. So I've had to learn almost maybe what I've learned, maybe not necessarily what I, have taken from it and take home with, it's really being able to separate it, because there's some days it's 12, 13 hours, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir with you and all the great work you're doing too. And just being able to be present and kind of separate the two, that's what has been really difficult, because now we got phones, we have tablets, you'll get a text message from somebody, you'll get an email, and it's like, oh, I got to answer this even though it's 8 o'clock at night. So that's been a learned art, being able to separate it.
Lance, you've rubbed elbows with some heavy hitters in person in Washington, D.C., and also on your podcast. Who has made you the most nervous, if anybody?
Oh, can I name more than one?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So I would say the nervousness isn't so much intimidation or like, kind of timid. It's more, I don't want to screw this up, so I'm extremely nervous because of who it is. But I try to give that same respect to no matter who it is. It could be the lady in Australia or, a United States senator. But for me, easily would have to be the event in DC. We were invited early spring of last year by the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, to come and cover and be a part of their national convening. I mean, one of the keynote speaker was the secretary of the VA. They had a couple of U.S. senators there, a couple of congressmen and women, Medal of Honor recipient. There's only like 63, I believe, living in the world who have received the Medal of Honor, and they don't come out very much. They're very private people, and getting to speak with them one on one, that was very nerve wracking. But I will tell you though, after talking to the first one or two, then I just, okay, this is what I normally do anyway. So it's,
Yeah.
but you still got the nerves. But then the other person I was the most nervous about was, his name is Jim Toohey. That may or may not be a name most people know, but he was somebody I really, really admired in college. I was taking a hospice course, and one of the first days of class, the professor added an item required reading and assignment to the syllabus that he had forgotten left off. And he said, I want everybody to go to the bookstore today or tomorrow, pick up the book Five Wishes, and you need to fill it out. And he proceeded to explain what Five Wishes is. It's a living document of what your wishes are, basically for when you are no longer able to speak on your own behalf and you have to appoint an advocate or a power of attorney, and listing kind of what your wishes are for when you pass. And I'm very young, very naive at the time, and I'm like, man, why do we have to do this? Like, come on, we're all young guys and gals, but that was very naive because now with hindsight and maturity, and I was mature then, but you just don't have that life experience, right? And so we've taken care of people in their teens, their early 20s, their 30s, their 40s. None of them thought anything was going to happen either. And some of them did, and some of them didn't have their wishes, documented or expressed. And it just makes it so much better for yourself, but also for your loved ones who are having to make decisions for you if you have those wishes down. And so I interviewed the president of Five Wishes, and told her my whole story, and we use Five Wishes here at our company, and really a great connection professionally and in the podcast world, and just great people. And I had just kind of floated it out there. I said, I would love, it'd be an honor. Could we ever interview Mr. Toohey? He's the founder of Five Wishes, which is the founder of agingwithdignity.org nonprofit. Just an amazing man, and I'll tell you how amazing here in a second. He served in the Bush administration, nonpartisan role. It was the position, I forget the exact title, but cabinet of faith or something like that. And then and he was an attorney, and he wasn't really a practicing person of faith when he got his law license many, many years ago. And he was assigned as Mother Teresa's personal attorney.
Wow.
Yeah. And that experience transformed his life dramatically, and he was with her upon her passing. I'm personally not Catholic, but I have a lot of respect for what Mother Teresa did. And that experience led him to Aging with Dignity, Five Wishes, working in the White House. But the fascinating part is he was also the first person to eulogize Mother Teresa at her funeral. And it just gave him such an appreciation for living and dying and aging, with dignity and having grace and making sure your wishes are fulfilled. And, he's kind of really spearheaded that dramatically. And Five Wishes is such a great resource. It's it's not a religious, text or anything. It is just a resource you could get at your senior center or go on their website. And you can fill it out yourself. I believe it's recognized as a legal document in every state, but maybe one or two or something like that. But it bypasses, if you don't want to get an attorney or if you need to get something done. But it's more than just what your advanced directives are, the heroic efforts, intubation, food, tube feeding, CPR, things like that. It's also, if I'm not able to speak for myself, I would like people to know. I would like to have, it could be, soft music playing in my room, have my hand held, somebody to talk to me, to reassure me, or I don't want to have any noise in my room. I don't, it lets you express exactly what your wishes are in the event you can't advocate for yourself. It is a tremendous document.
Mm.
So I was very nervous, being, able to finally interview him. It was about maybe a good 2 years later. And I finally had the opportunity to also thank him for his contribution to the field of healthcare and, advanced directives and stuff. And they just do amazing work. And he's such an amazing man. So I was very nervous.
The name that comes to my mind for me, and I think it pops up definitely because I just watched your interview with him, is Teepa Snow.
Okay.
She was part of my CNA training, and
Mm,
she had a profound impact on me because out of my six-ish grandparents, two of them step grandparents, five had some type of dementia,
mm.
and seeing how I may have interacted with them before Teepa Snow's training, made me want to forgive myself and also empowered me to be different when I became a CNA. So when I interviewed her, I was pretty intimidated. Do you have any embarrassing moments in an interview, technical or just a slip up where you said the wrong name and you either had to go back and edit or you had to redo it and you turned red?
Yeah, the biggest by far was, maybe 3, 4 years ago. There were some great guys from the UK, and they were big fans of ours, and they're doing just amazing work over in the UK. And we had this great interview, and they uh, they had at first originally they had asked me to be on their show, and I said, "Oh, absolutely." And they wanted to talk all about American healthcare versus the healthcare in UK and about care homes and all this stuff. Really, really, and they're doing great work. In fact, they're co-partners, co-hosts, but the one host actually had just given a big speech at the House of Commons, which is, in the UK, that would be like, you or I going to the Senate or the Congress and giving a speech, right? And so I said, of course, did the interview. And then I reciprocated. I said, love to have you guys on our show. That'd be great. I said, and, send us the footage from when you gave your speech at the House of Commons and, send us all your stuff. And, this was like 2 months in the making because they're 5 hours ahead of us, I believe, or 4 hours, depending on where you're at in the UK. And so it was a much later interview for me. And so, we do the interview. It was great. It was probably about an hour and 20 minutes or so, Peter. And I always say, when we're done, I'll say, hold on a second, let me turn all the recordings off and my cameras around me, and let's just chat for a minute. Because I like to get the guest input. Did they like everything? Is there something they want to change or have taken out? Because it's all about our guests, because it's really their story and it's their time. And we're just, the ones helping to facilitate it. And I turn off the recording on the laptop. I turn off the audio recording. I go to the studio cameras. I go to turn off the recording. And I realized I never turned on the recording. And that was so embarrassing. And I felt awful. I felt terrible. But they were very, very gracious. They're like, "Are you kidding? We probably do that once a month." I said, "Well, I don't." I said, "And I am so sorry." I said, "You name the time and the day." I said, "No matter what I have going on, it is yours. I want to make and they were just really cool about it. And they gave me heart palpitations because, I didn't want them to, feel like they wasted their time. And, we ended up doing it like a week later and it was great. But that one time has stood out so far, and long with me, that I always double check it when we're getting ready to record or welcome a guest on to make sure everything is on.
It's happened to all of us.
Yes.
It's happened
I,
to all of us. Have you ever gone back and listened to your first episode? I have not. I don't think I could listen to myself.
I was going to say, I hope you were saying I did not listen to your first one to me, because I encourage you not to. Please don't. Yeah, no, my kids always make fun of it because, they'll go on and, they'll like mess around. And once in a blue moon, like on our TV, it'll be like an old episode. And I mean old, like 4+ years old. I have, but I'll never do it again because it's just so bad. And several reasons. It was really when we first started. The intention of All Home Care Matters was just to be for that, couple of months we were bending the curve, and then when we were going to get back into doing our community events. But, we had all good equipment. But the studio camera, it was a Panasonic 4K, and the audio video store said this would be great for what we're doing. My video guy is like, I think you should have gone with a Canon, and I didn't know any better at the time, and so we went with it for like 20 episodes maybe. And like just the whole positioning, the background, we had like a beautiful stainless steel sign, and the show's name was originally Home Care Matters, but then the website we got was All Home Care Matters, and everything was All Home Care Matters. So you know we had to get rid of the stainless steel sign, beautiful, very expensive, by the way. And my wife, actually, she's the one that said, why don't we do a nice LED screen behind you instead? Because then you can put anything you want up there at any time. And I'm like, that's actually genius. So we did that, changed the positioning, a lot of stuff, but those are things and we're still trying to improve, Peter. Some breaking news here for you. We switched to Riverside. We haven't fully implemented it yet. We've added a straight on camera, which we'll be setting up here in the next week or so. And so we're always trying to look at ways, how can we just make what we're doing a little bit better?
Mm. How much excuse me, how much editing goes on, or how big is your team that does the editing?
Yeah, so mostly we have one video editor. He does a great job. I've known him. He's in his mid 20s now. I've known him since he was a young teenager. And it really started with him helping me with some ideas I had for our company, the actual home care side, where we would make some, one-off videos here and there, and that was pretty fun. And then when COVID hit and we decided to do a podcast, I knew I had, the guy for the job, and he's just amazing. He went to DC with us because, I needed to have somebody I could rely on and trust, and he had a great time. My kids absolutely adore him. They just think he's really super cool because it's not dad. And, he's in his 20s and he's, unlike dad.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so he does the video editing. And then we have a team for all the website stuff, and they're local as well. Been with them since the beginning. So we have a nice little team around us, that helps out with everything. And I think sometimes people duck and run when I say, "Hey, I have an idea," because they know what that means, but
Oh, no, more work.
yeah.
Is there something about you? You're a gifted storyteller in the sense that you ask questions to empower people to tell their own story. Is there something about your storytelling ability that that you've improved from the first episode to today?
I think just being more comfortable in general overall. My voice, when we decided to do this, Peter, the podcast, I didn't have a Facebook. I still don't have a Facebook. We have Facebook pages for like my name as a brand and the show as a
Mm-hmm.
brand and the other shows that we do. But I just didn't, I felt like you had to almost be performative rather than just talkative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've never wanted to be in front of a camera, never wanted to be on YouTube. None of that ever was of interest or a desire. Never wanted or needed to make films or videos. But now I see there's so much power in it and so much help that benefits people that it's like, this is a great way to do what, we want to do, and that's to help people. So we've really scaled dramatically back on our in-person stuff. We did just do our annual New Year's Eve party, which was great. We went on scene and recorded it this year and turned it into an episode. We've been doing these New Year's Eve parties for years and years and years, way before there was ever a show. And this year we said, why don't we do a video of it? So, we're at a senior center, talking with the seniors, getting their New Year's resolutions, giving a lot of attention to, to the executive director and his staff and the kitchen staff. And it's so much fun. I mean, that is a great New Year's Eve celebration for me because I don't stay out late. I don't even go out late. I don't party or anything on New Year's Eve. It's just not my thing. And but you still get to celebrate it, and you're with great people. And often my kids and my wife and my mother, we all go, and I think it also gives the seniors something to look forward to, so they're not alone on New Year's Eve, because that can be depressing, you know. In fact, we talk about it in the video where the director, he's like, you know, a lot of the senior centers are all closed down. He goes, and you know, and Lance came up with this idea when I took over, because I was on the board of directors there. And when he took over, I said, have you ever thought about doing it? Because we were doing these all over, and I had not done one there. And I said, have you ever thought about doing a New Year's Eve party? And he's like, no, not really. And he's like, Lance convinced me, and the rest is history. I mean, they had 60 some people the other day for the New Year's Eve party, and that's a great turnout for a New Year's Eve party.
Really, really neat. What is the part of your businesses that you do poorly and then therefore try to delegate or hire someone? What's the part that you're either bad at or dislike?
I would say I dislike, because I mean, if I had to, I would, but you would tell my heart's just not in it, and that is being a salesperson, and not for the podcast, but I'm talking about for the company. I, you know, I believe in, you know, you're a strong leader when you have people around you that can do things better than you, and marketing and sales is not my thing. I hate sales. I hate marketing. So we have someone that does that for us, because it would just not be good if I did it. It'd be like going to get a couple of root canals all in the same day. Like that is what I dislike with a passion.
Well, I know something that you do like. You recently picked up a new partnership, a new business called All's Authors. I just watched the interview that came out fresh on your YouTube 2 hours ago. Tell me about this new project and what's your vision for the next year?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for watching that, because we literally just put that up, and I mean, you knew we had this coming up, so that's awesome. Thank you, Peter. But you know, so All's Authors was formerly, until this past Wednesday, a 501(c) nonprofit organization, started about 11 years ago, and our podcast will be 6 years old in May. So All's Authors has been around almost twice as long as All Home Care Matters, but our company has been around almost 15 years. So, you know, we have a little seniority there, but we started noticing All's Authors on Twitter, Facebook, and I love reading, and I love books, and I love healthcare. So this was like almost kind of like, wow, this is awesome, and it is awesome. And they started it as a resource for people living with dementia, or for their families caring for loved ones with dementia, and to raise awareness and bring attention to it. And they had taken that initial idea and just amplified it dramatically, into the point it's internationally recognized as a one-of-a-kind resource in the entire world. Why is it one of a kind? You know, you and I are both in healthcare. You're around a lot. I'm around a lot. And you just know you can't go to a website and it's all dedicated just to, you know, another disease like, say, cancer, where you have all these independent authors and, you know, very prominent individuals that have written books. And the books aren't just like Amazon. You publish your book, it's there. It doesn't matter if it's real, fake, or not. There's a vetting system in place with real people that read the books and make sure you're not saying, you know, if you buy this book, we'll share the, you know, cure to Alzheimer's for you. You know, it's all deeply, deeply vetted. And once you get your book approved, you're now considered an All's author, which, you know, in this industry is a very, very big deal. And so fast forward, we start our podcast. You know, and I know All's Authors is there and love All's Authors, supported them prior to the podcast. Well, I told you we did like 20 episodes where it's kind of just me. Well, then all of a sudden we start getting emails. I never wanted to have guests on the show. I never planned on continuing the show after whatever timeline COVID opened back up here in Michigan, but it turned into being almost 3 years. So, I mean, it just became what it is because of that mostly. And then we saw how we're having such a positive impact and helping so many people. We couldn't stop at that point. And so when we started getting all these requests for guests, then it got to like, I wonder if there's anybody we should reach out to. And we reached out to Mary Ann Shuko, the co-founder of All's Authors, with Gene Lee and Vicky Tapia, and just sent, you know, a message, and it was through Twitter, said, you know, just want to share how much we appreciate the work you guys are doing, how much we've supported you through our home care company, told her the name of it, you know, all this stuff. would you ever consider being a guest on our show with us? Because at the time, we're really nobody. And, you know, we looked at this as like, this is a big, big deal. Why would they even bother? And she's like, oh, absolutely, would love to. Let's get on a call and talk about it. So we talked. She came on the show, and I said what I pretty much say to any of our guests, because I feel like if you come on the show, we're friends. And if I had you on and giving you this platform, we're going to support you anytime we can and anytime you need us. And so I said to her, and I think All's Authors in some shape, form, or fashion has been on the platform probably close to 20, 25 times, which is by far the most of any guest. And, you know, we've had them on for their film festivals. We had them on last year for their 10-year anniversary. You know, you name it. New books come out. We've had a bunch of their authors on the show. And so when our show really exploded, and it's starting to get, you know, all this news coverage and people wanting interviews, and I don't mean podcast interviews, but like print journalism interviews, we hired a marketing specialist for consultation. She wasn't marketing us anywhere. She was more of an advisor, because I remember saying to her, I said, look, I go to my email. I'm running a company during the day, and I'll check the podcast email maybe once in a while, and that's all changed also. And I said, I could have 100 emails in there just from today alone. I'm getting this, I'm getting that, I'm getting business opportunities. I need to know the best way to move forward, because when we started this, say maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever the timeline was back then, it wasn't designed or structured with a business structure. It was designed as, we're just going to make some videos and help some people, hopefully, and then we're going to get back to what we were doing prior to COVID. And so we met with her, and she said, well, you know, one of the meetings, she says, one of the things you're missing that you really need, and it's going to be very helpful for you, is a board of directors. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about it. I said, I've always been on boards. I'm on a board and this, that, and the other. I said, but I've never actually headed a board or created one. And so we kind of were talking about that, and there was really nothing to it. And she said, identify some people you really admire, respect, and have a lot of, you know, admiration in the community, and, you know, have a presence. Well, Marianne Shuko was one of them. And so we met, and she was on the board, and that's been about 4+ years now. She's been on the board. This past year, sometime around August or so, we had our monthly board meeting. Afterwards, she reached out to me and she said, hey, can we talk? I need to talk to you about the future of All's Authors. My first initial instinct was, oh man, they're shutting it down. They're retiring. You know, whatever it may be, because about 3 years ago, another big dementia brand in the UK reached out to us, who I was good friends with, and wanted to know if we were interested in taking over their brand. That's Dementia TLC. That's kind of like the All's Authors in the UK. Not nearly as big, but very similar. And so Marianne and I met, and she had said, hey, this is what we're doing. The board and the ladies, being Jean and Vicky, she said, everyone's looking to retire, but we want to keep All's Authors going. Would you be interested? I mean, before she probably even had it out of her mouth, I said, absolutely. And so for the past 4+ months, it's been a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of meetings, and, you know, everything in between. And it just became publicly announced on Wednesday. I was as excited as I have been in a very, very long time, just because of the deep respect I have for their work, and knowing what we can do with our platform and our reach and my team. I feel like it's going to just further amplify the voice of the All's Authors. And it's not just books. You know, yes, there's over 400 independent authors, some very prominent people, and some family caregivers who just wanted to share their story that are amazing. They created a podcast. They created their podcast about 5 years ago. And they have film festivals, you know, which might be of interest to you. And they publish articles and blogs, just all kinds of incredible things. And, you know, for them to choose us and entrust us, I mean, that is like beyond words of being able to explain it, because, you know, I look at this, Peter, it's kind of like, you know, we started All Home Care Matters almost 6 years ago now. If I had to step away for whatever reason, it would be terribly difficult to know who I could give it to where I would feel absolutely comfortable that they're going to keep the integrity of what I created intact and keep that name, you know, respectable and, you know, with the same influence that, you know, hopefully we made it into. That would be hard. That'd be hard
Yeah,
because you figure, you
it's your
know,
baby.
it's your baby. And that's what I said to them. I said, this is your baby. I said, can I love your baby as much as you? Absolutely not. I said, but I can sure be as close to it as I can. I said, and you know how I feel about each of you. And you know when they voted unanimously, I might add that I was the one. It just meant all the world to me.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think the follow-up question I have, and it's related to you taking over All's Authors, is how do you run so many businesses and different businesses? I know for me, probably the two books that had the biggest impact on the way that I run my business and the way that I even help my clients is probably EOS Traction and E-Myth Demystified. How do you run so many businesses? Do you have a philosophy or a framework that helps you do this?
Well, yeah, my philosophy, just like, you know, people ask about the success with our home care company and how we're able to retain staff. We're not anyone special, first and foremost. I am not a business person whatsoever. And I think that's also why I hate marketing and sales. I'm a healthcare person. I let the people with those strengths do those areas. But I always say, you know, be honest. You know, I can't tell you how many people we've interviewed for the company, and you know, one lady had said, "Oh, well, that's what the other company just told me," and they said I was getting a full-time job, and you know, that was 5 weeks ago, and I'm still waiting. And I would say to her, I say, you know, I understand that, and I go, I can tell you this. I said, one, first and foremost, we only hire when we actually have work to hire for, because we're not going to waste your time, and truthfully, we're not going to waste our time for hiring when we don't have any work. And I said, but no more would I hold that last candidate against you should you hold that last company against us. We are us and you are you. I could say, well, that's what the last candidate said. She's going to do this or he's going to do that. And then they no call, no show, or they never show up to do their background check. I go, that's them. I'm not holding them against you. I go, don't hold that other company against us. I said, but at the same time, don't just take us at our word either. You know, be smart about it. I said, let our actions speak louder than our words. Let us show you. Let us walk that walk. And then if we don't back up what we're saying, then you can call us out on it. But don't judge others based on past experience, but use past experience to inform your future.
Mm. Lance, as we start to wrap up, I want to take it back to baseball, and I
Yeah.
want you to envision this. If you need to close your eyes, feel free. But I want you to envision that you just got hired to give a keynote at the Atlanta Braves stadium, and it's going to be with all these home caregivers that love you, that you love them. You know how important they are and part of the backbone of US and taking care of family members. And they're asking you to do a keynote right from the pitcher's mound.
Oh.
And you have to walk up there like a Major League Baseball player to get the crowd hyped. What's the track? What's the song that you're going to have them play?
Does it have to be music per se?
No.
Okay. So I play this for my daughter a lot when we're on our way to her practice or games. And it's like 2 minutes long. I'll give you a track, but this would be my first choice. And it's called I Am a Champion. And I encourage, check it out, Peter. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. It was a high school football coach. He was being recorded. And it is a powerful speech. And it says, you know, basically, I will not accept defeat. My enemy, you know, thinks I'm scared of them. You know, history will remember me. And, you know, every time it's like, I am a champion. I am a champion. And I love it to death. It's so inspirational. That team ended up going out and winning the national or the state championship in high school football. But then the song, number two, the song would probably be Centuries by, I think it's Fall Out Boy.
Mm. That is great. Maybe we can ask your editor to put in that speech to wrap this up. And
Yeah,
Lance,
yeah.
I want to thank you for letting me turn the camera on you, and to the audience who follows you. Reach out to Lance and tell him how important he is. More importantly, share his story, share his podcast with a friend who hasn't doing it, because more people need to hear about great people like Lance. Thank you all for tuning in. Lance is an inspiration for me. It's been an honor. Thank you all for giving him the time and the attention that he deserves.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Peter Murphy-Lewis for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.